Why Churches Stop Growing at Predictable Barriers, right now on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and A.J. Mathieu.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, A.J. Mathieu.
I salute you this morning, ready to go. We're talking growth barriers today. What do you got to say about that?
Okay, so I think this is a common, we don't do topics like this very often because we have this fundamental belief system that when you're really a healthy church, the growth is going to happen, and we would much rather talk about those components of optimizing church health, which is going to lead to growth.
Yeah.
We would just much rather live there. However, I think it is important to recognize that there are some pragmatic realities that happen when a church that is healthy starts to grow, that you can artificially put a cap or a ceiling or a barrier in front of you, that even though the culture of your church is very healthy, you're just not able to manage that growth very well, and then it starts to become a problem. And those barriers are real. They are not, it isn't as if, I guess I want to be clear on this, it isn't as if you remove these barriers, then the church is automatically going to grow, because I really believe that good growth comes from being healthy. However, you can be a healthy church and start to grow, and then that growth can start to sort of level off or even start to decline if you don't deal with some of these pragmatic issues that you start to hit as you move along. Is that a balanced way of describing it?
I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
And there are others out there, AJ, and you know this, that will go like, well, here are the growth barriers, and if you just get rid of these barriers, you're going to accelerate. And that's not what we're saying. It's more like, no, these are barriers that happen. When you're healthy and you're growing the right way, these barriers do exist, and you kind of got to clear these out of the way.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there definitely are others, in the space or that have produced content or books that, talk about those barriers are being the problem. And, so no, that's not us. You're not going to hear that from the old Malphurs Group guys.
It's just not our philosophy.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there aren't pragmatic barriers. And we thought it's worth an episode to talk about some of these things that happen when you start to grow, versus maybe thinking of it as these are barriers to get rid of so that you will start to grow. Those are not the same thing.
And I would also add any numbers that you hear us say take those with, plus or minus 20%, 30%.
Yeah.
There's a variety of
hard and fast rules on there.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's jump into, we got 3 barriers to talk about today. Before we do that though, Scott, let's talk about the barrier that people might be feeling to getting a 7-day free trial in the Healthy Churches Toolkit. I can't think of a barrier that would exist that would keep you from getting 7 days free in the Healthy Churches Toolkit.
No, there isn't any. The only barrier is between you and your keyboard going to healthychurchestoolkit.com. Scroll down there and say, I want to sign up for 7 free days. We had somebody, you can sign up for a free account, by the way. And we had someone recently do this. And I think they were frustrated that they weren't able to access materials. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's because you signed up for a free account, which doesn't have all the things. But you can sign up for any level of account. I would recommend the Plus account. You can sign up for free for 7 days, try out all the things, kick the tires, as it were, and then pick the appropriate access that you need in order to get what you need out of the toolkit.
Yeah. What's the history of tire kicking? I've bought a lot of cars, never once kicked a tire. Why were people kicking the tires back in the day? That was a thing that mattered? What kind of feedback were you wanting from that? I don't know.
Did that just help us get someone to sign up for the toolkit or not, AJ? Your digression to tire kicking.
Maybe we need a course on how to make a decision without needing to kick a tire. We'll add
But
that
you
to
do
the
need
tool.
but you might not need to kick a tire, but you do need 7 days free. So go to healthychurchestoolkit.com. Sign up for free for 7 days. Don't sign up for a free account. Sign up for a plus account for free for 7 days.
Do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That way you can get the whole enchilada. Whoever got a half enchilada? Why would you do that? What are these people? Who are these people? Not taking the
Kicking
whole enchilada
tires.
and kicking tires. It makes no sense.
Eating half of an enchilada.
What is going on with the world?
And also,
Like,
whoever ate just one enchilada.
seriously.
I mean, I guess if you're getting a combo plate with like a taco and an enchilada.
I guess one enchilada might suffice. It better be a big plate. I want a big plate of Mexican food when I'm eating. If there's only one enchilada,
We are 6 minutes
loading
into
me
this episode. We have not gotten to one barrier.
we are creating a barrier to people getting the information that we're
exactly.
supposed to be getting. All right.
Let's get
Barrier
into
number
this.
one. The pastor could be the barrier. When the pastor is essentially the church.
Mhm.
Can happen in a variety of ways. Doesn't have to be like, it was a church plant and then it grew to this size. That could be a scenario. It could have been a church that just got a new pastor. Maybe they were declining. Regardless, we're talking about probably in the neighborhood of 100 or so in attendance.
Yep.
And you start bumping into how many relationships, personal relationships, can one human manage, which varies somewhat, probably not wildly, but yeah, it's that certainly that small church feel. Everybody knows the pastor. He's aware of everybody's, personal situations. He's the one doing all of the hospital visits or all of the pastoral care. And you can begin to stall out from a relationship perspective there. And that can create this barrier in that 100-ish range. And so, that's one thing that you need to be able to break through by developing, some additional ministry systems in the church to offload that. First of all, I would say probably the pastoral care issue away from the pastor so that people, just don't feel like that's the one key relationship that keeps them connected to the church. We need to create pathway for other areas to develop key relationships where you feel connected still and you're not imposing that on your pastor.
Yeah, I think maybe related to this. This is not in our notes. I'm speaking extemporaneously here. Maybe this fits more in part 2. I don't know. But I think often in these scenarios, there are 3 committees, or 4 or more, that are all deliberative in function. So they you could have a church of 100 people, and you could have 5 or 6 committees that each have 10 people on them. So like 60% of the church is on a committee, or some people are on multiple committees, or very often in these churches, the committees aren't fully staffed. They're totally defunct. But even the ones that do exist and are meeting and are staffed are deliberative. So they get together, they meet, and they make decisions, and then there's just one executor of ministry, and that's the pastor. And so this pastor has 5 bosses, which are the committees, and those committees are staffed by a handful of people apiece, and they're all saying, "Here's what we got to do," and then you've got the pastor who's going to do it. And then there's usually, this isn't to, I don't want to overstate and say that there aren't volunteers. Of course there are, but it's usually the same 15, 20, 30 people in a church of 100, maybe 40 people who are doing 100% of everything. But all of the connective tissue is the pastor. The pastor is, in one sense, the bottleneck, in another sense, the connective tissue, in another sense, a hireling. Because very often, sometimes in these situations, the pastor has no actual authority, but he's expected to do everything. So it just depends on the denomination and the background. But when the pastor basically is the church, everything is wrapped up in this one role, it can really be a problem. And it can be difficult for a church that maybe was 30, 40, 50 people. Now they're a church of 80, 90, 100 people, and they're thinking, well, this is going well. And it is compared to where they were, but they're just not going to be able to grow past that until they start building out some better infrastructure there, and some systems for handling things and transitioning some of those deliberative bodies away to actually being teams that do work versus groups that tell the pastor what he should do.
Yeah, so we really are kind of identifying two barriers within this,
Sorry.
bottlenecking both at the pastor. No, that's okay. I mean, it's completely valid. And so, yeah, one being the personal relationship management by one person, the pastor, and the other being people being able to share the load of ministry with him. So, yeah, completely valid and seen frequently in this size church that we work with, for sure. I've mentioned this before, but I had a church, probably in the neighborhood of this size that, I don't remember if it was like a deacon or an elder, but a church leader, felt his stance was the pastor should be able to know everyone's name and recognize them by face.
Mm.
And he just like said that as if that's what would be expected of a pastor. They would know everybody. And I was like, well, okay. What kind of numbers are you thinking about for that? What capacity do you think you'll have for memorization that would make that feasible? To which he was like, oh, I don't know. So, that's probably not a good way to think about, how to run a church. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a good transition to the second barrier here, which is that we've labeled this when relationships can't scale. And you might think, well, that just sounds like the first thing you talked about. But now we're focusing less on the pastor and more towards how the church feels about itself. So the things you'll start to hear are, it just doesn't feel like a family anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody used to know everybody. And then you've got people who are new to the church. So you maybe have like small groups or more often Sunday school classes that are entrenched and haven't seen a new person since 86. And those relationships are established, but there aren't really good, clear on-ramps for new people to get connected into relationships. So they're just kind of coming on Sunday, and it's kind of ruining the feel for the people who have been there a long time. They're like, I don't know who all these new people are, and they're not very committed. They're not in a group. Well, how would they get into one? Because your group's has been socially saturated or relationally closed. Even if technically open, like anyone's allowed to come, but no one's breaking into that for your friend group from 86. So, this starts to become a problem, just managing the congregational relationships. So not the relationship of the pastor to the people, but the relationships of the people to the people. And, this is where it would really flex, AJ, in terms of size. Some of this is based on facility. Some of this is just based on culture. You can start to feel this when you're at 200, or maybe you don't feel this until you get to 400 or 500. It's just going to depend on your facility situation and how many people you can pack in a service and what your capacity is for Sunday school and small groups and things like that as it exists.
Yeah, this is an interesting space right here because there is a scenario. This is where we talk health versus unhealth, and we did a episode on this not too long ago, Scott, about maybe it was last year, about how unhealthy churches can grow as well. Mm-hmm. And this is an area which you can see this happen. You can go on past this point, and the reason it works is because you just kind of skip over this as being a need, and you never even talk about it. Mm-hmm. Now, there has got to be other reasons that the church would grow, and it could be facility, it could be, charismatic pastor, people just like to hear him speak, and the church can continue to grow past this, and they never even talk about being connected. It's just not really an element that the church does. It's a Sunday-only church. I mean, it's come here once a week. That's all we're asking of you, and those churches can blow past this. Whether they might have small groups, they might not. But it's just not a thing. They just don't push that at all. So you can grow a church beyond 250 just ignoring relationships, essentially. And
Right.
I'll call that shallow church. You can grow shallow church, which we would also define as unhealthy church. But yeah, because people will see this, and it's also, I think it's important, especially for those that are trying to grow a healthy church and get frustrated perhaps, with the flashy church downtown that, what, wow, they're growing so fast. Yes, but things aren't always what they seem from the outside. So, I mean, don't get caught up trying to be like somebody else or envy.
Yeah.
Just grow your healthy church the right way. And that might mean a little bit slower and it might mean more intentionality,
Yeah,
but
and
it's
I
worth
guess
it.
I would also like to say too, I think we talked about this in some other episode relatively recently, or maybe not. I don't remember. Um, but like there are some churches who see their small size as a virtue. But if I were new to your church, maybe you're a church of 100 people, um, if you don't have a clear on ramp for me to get engaged in community, you're just as unhealthy as the big church that doesn't have an
Mm,
on ramp for me to get
yeah,
plugged into
yeah, that's
community.
good. That one cuts a little bit. Yeah,
And that's very often the case is that,
yeah,
you know, you do have new people who come and then they do leave and they leave because
hmm,
they can't get connected. And
that's
they're going to
right.
go to the big church down the street that even though they're bigger and they can't know everybody, they can know somebody. And that's more important. And so don't be too quick to be critical of the church down the street that seems to be growing. Unless you're there, you don't know if it's healthy or unhealthy growth.
Yep.
But don't be too quick to ascribe to yourself, we're healthy because we're small. We're doing discipleship better. That's very often not the case. So health
True.
is not size dependent. You can be a large church and healthy. You can be a small church and healthy. You can be a large church and unhealthy, and you
Hmm.
can be a small church and unhealthy.
Yep.
And so there's just way too much obsession with size or assumptions about size and health. And each church should be, I have a dream that we would one day judge churches on the content of their discipleship character and not on the size.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, because is the church on mission or is it a family? I guess is the question.
Yep.
Yeah. What are we really doing here? Or are we just hanging out?
Yep.
Okay. Our third barrier is when the pastor's leadership style might become a problem.
Uh-huh.
Um, and the larger an organization gets, the more complex its leadership structure needs to be. Not that it doesn't need to become prohibitive. It doesn't need to become overly complicated, but it needs to scale.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is just adding, one other key leader in a particular area. But it definitely means beginning to train volunteers beyond, hey, go stand there, to can you train somebody to do what you do?
Yeah.
Let's leveling everybody up. But
Yep.
the pastor's style will become a barrier to that if he's trying to hold on to 100% of decision making, or if everything has to pass through him, if he's a bottleneck. These are all potential barriers to the church growing beyond. And we're talking perhaps this 250-ish area where you are definitely too big for a single leader,
Mhm.
or you will plateau at that point. You're going to have a plurality of people that are equipped and empowered to make decisions and to train others, so that
Yeah.
you can keep going again in a healthy way.
Yeah. So again, some people might go, well, this is just point one again. Your point one, barrier one was the pastor is the church. And you're saying, okay, barrier three, the pastor's leadership style is the problem. Well, in point one, we're talking about sort of the expectation of the people
Mhm.
is that the pastor is the executor of everything.
Yeah,
When you get to this
and
third barrier
available
and
all the time.
available, yeah.
Yeah.
When you get to barrier three, this is more the pastor's perception of himself. And at this point, there might be some teams in place and some staff. But when the pastor views himself as like all the authority is vested in me, and it's a control issue, this is where it starts to become a problem. You start to have to decentralizing some control. So, like I'm working with this church right now. I think they listen to the podcast and they're a great church. I was just with them a few weeks ago, and they're growing, like they're growing a lot. They're growing a lot. And the pastor right now, he's drowning. He's drowning. He does not feel the need for control. But the church has the thing has just been built around, hey, we got a senior minister who's going to do this, and he's drowning. He's like, I would love to share leadership, kind of let go of some discipleship, not discipleship, but management of discipleship ministries, and let go of managing operational things, and have some elevate kind of two other leaders alongside me on my same level, who I can direct, but share authority with. And that's sign of a healthy leader, is someone who's like, I don't have to control all the operational side of things. I don't have to control every staff person, does not have to report to me. I can trust this other person to lead large chunks of our staff. And I can give direction to them. And obviously I can step in a crisis scenario, but I can let things go. When you've got a pastor who can't let things go, that's a problem. And if you're looking at yourself and going, I have control issues, I can't let things go, you're the problem. And that is not the same as barrier one, where it's like the church puts this expectation on you. This is your inability to let things go, is the third barrier.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. All of these, I think we see with some frequency, for sure.
Yeah.
And they can all be worked on. None of these are overnight changes either. I mean, all three of these take some time to be able to move past. Some of them are cultural, some of them are personality driven, and neither of those things are overnight changes. You can make some fairly rapid changes, but actually getting your heart there and comfortable with it is what will take time. And that's going to take, I think a humble spirit to go, all right, we've made a change. I'm out of my comfort zone, but we need to let this settle in and see how it benefits us.
Might I say, just throw this out there as we kind of are wrapping up. This is why it can be really helpful if you're encountering any of these barriers at any of these sizes. Working with a certified guide from our team is helpful. And I guess I would say, working with anybody, even if you're not working with us, it's very difficult to address these barriers yourself. And that's not a question of your competency. The very best surgeon on the planet would not perform his own appendectomy. And that's not a question of his skill. It's about perspective. And very often when you're dealing with these dynamics within church teams and other leaders, when you go in and say, hey, we need to change this system, or we need to work on this thing, it is not received the same way as when someone else is invited in to help you build these things together.
Yeah.
And every epistle from Paul is exactly this. It's someone who's connected and a brother coming in and trying to help a church get healthy. And we're not comparing our certified guys to apostles, just to be clear. But the fact that there is an advantage to somebody who is a I don't want to call them a strategic outsider. I want to call them a brother or sister coming in and helping to lovingly partner and come alongside of you. I hope this isn't heard as a sales pitch, even though I guess somewhat it is. It's just a confrontation of reality that it's very difficult to address these barriers on your own. And so obviously we would love for you to work with one of the folks that's in our team of certified guides, which you can learn more about at malphursgroup.com. But maybe it's your denomination, or maybe you have some other group that you'd like to work with. I'm advocating for working with someone who's objective, if you're encountering one of these barriers.
Yeah. I mean, I had that exact scenario recently with the church that I worked with earlier this year. And, through the course of the work, I was seeing how everything kept getting offloaded onto the pastor and his wife to lead everything, to make everything happen. And the team, or some people on the team wanted to continue to have a lot of things they were doing, or to even add things. And I was like, you cannot keep adding all this stuff to them. They were in the room. And afterwards, the pastor was like, man, thank you for that. I don't know how to say that myself. I'm glad you were able to be here and say that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, don't be afraid to ask for some help. So I'm more, I guess it's a sales pitch for getting someone to come alongside you than it is for us specifically. But of course, we would love to help you with that. We are a nonprofit group, and so we try to keep our costs as low as we possibly can to help as many churches as we can. You can learn more about that at malphursgroup.com. And thanks for listening. And I hope you will subscribe, share this episode with a friend in ministry who maybe needs to hear it. And maybe you got somebody you know who's in a growing church, or maybe you've got some leaders in your church, your growing church, and you want to pass this along. We'd love for you to do that. Like and subscribe. And thanks for sharing the episode. And we'll see you next week on the Church Revitalization Podcast.